My name is Nathan Jordan, and for the Pro-Con Challenge, I'll be doing a piece of Congress legislation. So my speeches will be formatted in Congress style with a 3-minute aff, and then I will give a 3-minute neg. Before we do that, though, I'm going to read out the bill. A resolution to end the One China policy and to establish formal relationships with Taiwan. Whereas the United States continues to solely recognize the People's Republic of China as the sole Chinese government, and whereas Taiwan and the People's Republic of China are two culturally and politically distinct nations, and whereas current Chinese aggression and perpetuity towards Taiwan has only grown in recent years, thus increasing the Chinese military and economic pressure on the island, and thus have resulted in increased Taiwanese dependence on China, and whereas the Democratic Progressive Party of Taiwan, which have recently won over a majority of votes, seeks for independence from mainland China, now therefore be it resolved by the Congress that the Congress here assembled call on the President of the United States to abandon and eliminate the One China policy in favor of a more accurate and reflective policy to recognize the two separate Chinas as two separate and sovereign nations, and be it further resolved that the President of the United States shall normalize and engage in formal diplomatic relations between the United States and of America and Taiwan. Bit of a tongue twister. Okay. And I'll go ahead and start my time for my first speech in affirmation right now. Okay, I don't typically hold grudges. But this one time in kindergarten, I was bullied. I was bullied and excluded all because I decided to wear a Thomas the Train backpack to school. I show up to school with a smile on my face, and this kid named Ty makes fun of me because my backpack isn't cool enough and it's for little kids. And kindergartners aren't little kids, so I wasn't allowed to hang out with him. So I came home, abandoned my ways in tears, and got a gray backpack to wear to school the next day. It's never fun being excluded and bullied. That was a lesson that I learned from a young age. We see this type of exclusion and bullying happening even on the world stage. It's currently happening with China and Taiwan, where China is using its influence to bully the rest of the world to exclude Taiwan. And so the United States has a policy which reflects this, the One China policy. And today, I'd like to speak in affirmation of the resolution to ditch the One China policy and get more reflective way of referring to the two nations. To understand this, we'll look at two separate areas. First, we'll go ahead and look at the history of One China policy. And after that, we'll go ahead and look towards our moral obligation to help out Taiwan. First, what we ought to look to is the history of it all. The Council of Foreign Relations in 2020 detailed in a report about the One China policy. Initially, both Taiwan and China both wanted the One China policy because this policy essentially says that both Taiwan and China are parts of one government. Yet, we have no comment on which one will rule. So you have two contesting parties who want to rule China as one nation. You have the island of Taiwan with their democratic beliefs, and you have mainland China with their communistic beliefs. And so, since mainland China is bigger, they get to bully down on the Taiwanese government. Yet, now Taiwan has decided that they want to ditch this policy. They want to get rid of the One China policy. And we have a moral obligation to support them. Because let's think back to our own history. Need I remind you, way back when in America, we were just some crazy people revolting against the Brits, and we had the help of the French. We only won because of France. Because they believed that we would be a good asset and we shared French values, that they ought to help us. Taiwan shares our values. They believe in democracy. They believe in a free election. They believe in the voice of the people. So we have a moral obligation to stand up for them. We need to stand up. We must stand up against the bullies and say that enough is enough. No more exclusion, whether it's over a Thomas backpack or over something crazy like economic policy. Thank you. And that speech was 3 minutes and 5 seconds. I will go ahead and start my next speech. Let me tell you a story. This is the story of King Midas. King Midas was a man who was pretty dang greedy. And so one day he was rewarded by the gods for some reason and given a superpower. Every single thing he touches would turn to gold. So we celebrate. He touches his bed, he touches the walls, everything turns to a beautiful, shining gold. Perfect, he says. So he walks downstairs, turning everything to gold on the way, grabs some grapes, and goes to eat it, and ow! Oh, that was a very tough grape. Because all of a sudden, his breakfast turned to gold, and he couldn't eat it. And he sees his daughter, and he runs up and tells her about it, and gives her a huge hug, and his daughter turns to gold. King Midas thought that everything he touches turns to gold, and that would make everything instantly better. The United States has this very same approach. We say that in other countries, whether it's Afghanistan or others, that everything we touch turns to gold. The United States foreign intervention is the solution to every single problem. So with this resolution, we look at another example to add gasoline to the fire, to say that we're going to interject ourselves in other countries' business, because after all, if the United States puts our business in there, of course it's going to make everything better. So we ought to look towards why we must not pass this resolution for two main reasons. First, we'll go ahead and look at our extreme economic dependence on China and why we cannot risk that. And after that, we'll go ahead and look towards the rising tensions with China, between China and Taiwan, and why we must pursue diplomacy over anything. First, we ought to look towards our personal relationship with China. Bloomberg in 2020 details that we rely on China much more than China relies on us. Because we want to make sure everyone in our country is fed. We want to protect everyone. China is not limited by this. So they have no problem oppressing minorities and starving its citizens just to get back at the United States. So we can't risk our relationship with them because we need them more than they need us, because they're willing to choke out their bottom citizens. After that, we ought to look towards rising tensions. South China Morning Post in 21 reports that China is getting ready for war with Taiwan. By 2025, China is planning to launch a ground invasion, and they're already mustering up the resources. This is a very, very dangerous situation. We ought to tread carefully. If we're to just say, hang on a second, let's just go ahead and recognize Taiwan, then you've got a problem on your hands. What we're going to see happen is that China is going to respond aggressively. And they won't just be aggressive towards Taiwan, they will be aggressive to the United States. We must pursue diplomacy, not those wartime strategies, because what we need to realize is that we are not King Midas. The United States is not this magical entity, and everything we touch is not instantly better, as though it is turned to gold. Thank you. That last speech was 3 minutes and 13 seconds. Thank you for judging.